You are watching Co-op for Two, broadcasting live from Champaign, Illinois, Sunday afternoon, May 5th, 2024, around 3 p.m. We are continuing our reading through of a Sherlock Holmes murder mystery dossier, a retelling of A Study in Scarlet, the first Arthur Conan Doyle novel that introduced Sherlock Holmes, and here we have a retelling of it in sort of diaries and facsimile documents put together by John Watson, sort of like looking at the story, the origin story of Sherlock Holmes from a different angle. We've got some stuff to cover before we get started, but let me check in with the chat and see how everyone is doing. Looks like we've got the regular play-by-mail crew, Sherlock Holmes crew here today. YouTube says 7 concurrent viewers and 3 likes. So let's talk a little bit about where this fits in with our Sunday live streams and what our plans are moving forward. I don't think we're going to finish this today, but I think we've got this session and one more and we'll finish it. Which makes sense. This is the 3rd session? So 4 sessions, 4 weeks, we'll finish it, just like our play-by-mail cases. And then after we finish this, so in 2 weeks, we will return to playing the Dear Holmes letters. I have 2 of the next 4 letters have arrived. They are definitely delayed. They are shipping like every 2 weeks instead of every week. But I think in 2 weeks when we play the next one, we'll be safely, we'll have enough buffer that we'll be able to finish the next case in the next 4 weeks. I am trying very hard to locate older letters from Dear Holmes. If I can get some older letters, we'll be able to play them more regularly. Okay, there's that. In the intervening week between the last session and today, I did post 3 videos, 3 shorter review videos on the channel. A review of the 2 side quest puzzle escape room games, small card-based games, one of which I recommend, one I wouldn't. We played those on the channel. And I posted a review of the Morrison Game Factory. You can see that behind me there. A deluxe narrative story-based puzzle game that I had a couple of complaints about a couple of the puzzles, but overall a very special experience and one I would recommend. And I also posted a review of what? What else did I review? Someone remind me on the channel. 3 reviews. The side quest games, the Morrison Game Factory game, and something else. Why my lack of sleep is suddenly showing. I mean, I could bring it up. Joe J. Anderson asks, was it 7 Citadel? It certainly wasn't. I will post a review of the 7 Citadel after we play through one full threat campaign. We've played about, I think, 35 hours, maybe 40 hours on the channel. It's still very compelling. I think we'll play through another session, another long chunk of it this coming week. No, I reviewed, why isn't it on the wall somewhere? Really, no one is going to help me out here and tell me what I reviewed? All right, well, I guess it can't be that important if I can't remember it. So that's that. We also played on Tuesday, which is fun to interweave it with reading A Study in Scarlet. We played a Sherlock Holmes Consulting Detective proper game case from the West End Adventures box. It was a very long session, maybe 6 or 7 hour case. It was quite well done, lots of little loose ends to wrap up, but it was kind of fun. We're reading this and learning about the origin of Sherlock Holmes, and then we played a real classic case written around the same time that this was written. And Marco is reminding me that the third review that I posted was of the latest Cryptic Killers game, Murder at Manor Hill, which was quite good. Right before I came on, Jonathan Gang messaged me and said, hey, the Cold Case Investigation Unit series released their 4th case today or in the last couple days. We played through 3 of those on the channel. They were quite good, sort of classic cold case in the style of the Cryptic Killers games. We played the first 3 on the channel, and a new one is out. And thanks to the Patreon supporters who have joined to support this channel and help me pay for some of the games we play, I just purchased that and had it sent. So as soon as that arrives, we'll play that. And I really do want to thank those of you who are helping pay for the games on this channel. It really does help and makes a difference. And it's great that we have no entanglements with any publishers. We don't have to feel like we are in any way influenced by trying to get free copies of games and all that. We'll buy the games ourselves and we'll be our own little family here. We'll worry about ourselves, not about pleasing anyone else. Okay. The other little piece of news is the channel has reached 3,000 subscribers, which is fun. It doesn't make any practical difference to any of us, but it is kind of fun. And I've been working, I spent the last couple days trying to upgrade, successfully upgrading all of the plugins I've written for OBS to a new version of OBS. Some changes were needed. Some point this week, I'll switch over and start using the latest version of OBS, and we'll hopefully that there won't be any hiccups there. I am curious to see if I can possibly code the top-down cubes that zoom in. Let's just check it out here. I was why is it not? Why is it not zooming in? I was seeing that NVIDIA released an upscaling filter, and I was wondering if I guess that's as far as I zoomed in here. Anyway, they released an upscaling filter, and I was wondering if it might be used to sharpen when I'm very zoomed in on a wide angle view. The 7 Citadel playthroughs have been good tests of the new camera because it's such a sprawling map, and it looks pretty good on the new camera, but I'm wondering if the upscaling NVIDIA API would let me get them even sharper. So I may spend a couple days trying to do that. Logan in the Discord, one of the artists who have been working on high and low art, has started to seriously draw buildings for the maps in high and low. It's one little weaknesses of the game that sort of shows that the maps feel very plain, and they're looking a lot better with his drawing. So I can't wait to show you that. And I will have another game design diary soon in a couple weeks, and maybe I can show off some of that. Other little bits. I guess the only other thing that I wanted to cover is that very soon we're going to be playing a couple of long games that will take us a week to get through. John Keen's follow-up to Razorhurst called Razorhurst Blood Alley. Probably take us a week to play through. And I have a new 6-part series from Lovely City that I want to play through. So if you are particularly interested in joining for one of those, you should head over to the Board Game Geek Guild for this channel. There's a link to it on YouTube somewhere. And when you visit that, it's a little forum on Board Game Geek. For this channel, there's a thread called the Game Queue thread. And you might post there and say, hey, this would be a good day, week, month for me. I'm particularly interested in joining through the playthrough of whatever. And I can't guarantee it, but I do try to accommodate. We do try to find the right days that accommodate most people. I did think of two last things. Rob, who's here in the channel and who helped John Keen with the latest updates to Razorhurst, making them look good, has been updating us in the Discord. There's been some discussion of Gumshoe. Gumshoe is right behind me there, this blue box here. One of the largest, most ambitious Sherlock Holmes Consulting Detective spin-offs, a 10-day epic campaign, the closest inspiration for High and Low, has had some updates now to the public domain scans that are available. And a couple people have jumped in the Discord and have been playing through Gumshoe, Stacy and someone else, I forget the name. It's one of the rarer, harder to get games. And if you're interested in playing that, if you stop by the Discord for Co-op for Two, someone can point you to some of the links where you could get digital versions to play since it's been out of print for so long. Okay, final thing before we get started here with A Study in Scarlet Session 3, I did want to recommend something to you. My mother has been pushing this on me for a while. The New York Times has a game called Connections. There's a new, you may be familiar with Wordle. That was the word-based puzzle game, sort of like a hangman for words that sort of everyone started playing, including me for a little bit. This one is much more interesting. So if you like word puzzles, word games, I do want to recommend you check this out. It's got one of these, it's got a couple of elements that make it work as a compelling game. The way it works is you're supposed to find 4 groups of 4 words. So 16 words total in a grid. It's always a grid. The words are randomly scattered in there. And each day there's a new puzzle. And you have to figure out how you would group the 4 words. 4 groups of 4 words. So if you thought that, like, maybe you thought, okay, they were all things that were all letters that started with an E. So you started saying, okay, E, egg, and then, okay, that's wrong. So you have to find a group of 4 that all are related in some way. and then another group of 4 that are all related in some way, and another group of 4. And the way they could be related could be semantically, it might be the meaning of the word, could be the sound of the word, could be basically everything. So it's a little constraint satisfaction, involves some sort of deep, sometimes deep understanding of word meanings, and there's a little bit of push your luck element, because sometimes you think, well, let me just take a guess. I think these 4 are the 4 that are related. So you put in 4, you say submit, and then if you get 4 right, those get ruled out, and you try to work on the next set. So it's got like a little bit of everything that make it work to be a very compelling game, and it does force you to really think outside of the box sometimes about these words. So I do want to recommend that. Is anyone on the channel here? I know this isn't our puzzle group. We have sort of different groups that join me for different days, and this is the Play by Mail Sunday shorter afternoon stream. Sort of a different group than join me for the Deadbolt Mystery Societies, which are a different group than join me for the long, week-long cases, but there's overlap, of course. Anyway, does anyone play Connections? All right, I can't wait for an answer. YouTube is too delayed. Let's do a little bit of very short catch-up on a study in Scarlet. Watson and Holmes have met each other, and Holmes has got called into a case to help Lestrade and Gregson, the 2 Scotland Yard detectives. They found a dead body, very contorted, with a horrible look on his face, kind of looks like an ape and stuff. Holmes studied the scene, smelled this guy's mouth, seems to smell poison, is convinced there's poison. There's some blood, but it's not this guy's blood because he's not been wounded. He's sort of dressed well. There's a business card in his pocket, Enoch Drebber from Cleveland, Ohio. Some other things found on his body. When they move the body, a little ring falls down. Holmes studies the approach, notices that it's a cab. It brought 2 different people, one with pointed shoes, one with square-toed shoes. We find out that this guy was scheduled to leave aboard a boat. Written on the wall in peeled off wallpaper near a candle is the letters R-A-C-H-E, with the A written a little oddly. One of the Scotland Yard detectives said, he was writing Rachel. She's probably the woman related to this ring. Holmes says, nope, that's not it at all. This is the word Rach, meaning revenge in German. But Holmes doesn't think that that's significant, actually. He thinks Holmes acknowledged that there were still a few obscure points, but believed this last to be merely a ruse to put the police on the wrong track. For a real German would have printed in Latin letters and not used a clumsy imitation German A. So there's that. He talks about his observations of 2 men. They talk to the police officer who came into the building. And we look at his report, but he's left out something which he tells Holmes in person. He tells Holmes that there was a drunk outside the gate. And he describes him, a sort of tall man with a ruddy face, brown overcoat. And Holmes realizes, hey, that was the killer. That was the second guy. He was back to get his ring. Holmes says the ring probably dropped onto the body during the murder or whatever. And this guy probably wants his ring back, was trying to get in when he stumbled on the cops. So Holmes comes up with a plan. And the plan is to put an ad in the paper saying a ring was found on the street nearby. If it's your ring, come get it from Watson. He reasons that this guy wants this ring for reasons they don't quite know. In fact, a woman does show up for the ring. And then we get some papers excerpts, and the papers have two things in them. One, they have the ad for the ring, but they have also from each different paper a little description, a little article about the murder, the mystery murder in Brixton, and hypothesizing different little elements of it. The person shows up for the ring. It's a little old woman instead of a man that they suspect, that they expected to come in, and instead it's a woman. The woman has some story about how her daughter or whatever lost it. They give her the ring, or maybe a facsimile, a copy of the ring, not the real ring. And Holmes goes to follow her, this little old lady who's sort of hobbling. He says, go to 13 Duncan Street. Holmes hops on the back of the cab to follow her. When the cab comes to light and Holmes waits for her to get out, he looks in and she's completely gone. So she's gave him the slip. And that's when Holmes realizes that, let's see, what does Holmes say to Watson about it? Watson says, I laughed in amazement to think that the tottering, feeble old woman had been able to get out of the cab while it was in motion without Holmes or the driver seeing her. Holmes replied rather sharply that it was they who were the old woman to be so taken in. It must have been a young man, and an active one too. Besides being an incomparable actor, he had noticed that he was followed and used this as a way of giving him the slip. So they think actually it was a young man acting as a woman. And I think that's where we ended our session. Yeah, just a couple more little articles about the murder. This one says it was politics. I'm trying to remember if we learned anything about yes, we did learn. We did learn that who they're looking for. So Enoch Drebber is the guy who is dead. They don't know who the second man is. However, they did discover that there is another man traveling with Mr. Drebber. His name is Joseph Stangerson, believed to be Mr. Drebber's secretary. And this paper says it's political. But they can't find Stangerson. No mention at all of the woman who this ring might be about. But they are all looking for Joseph Stangerson. Okay, so that's where we are. And here is our we're going to start reading our new stuff. Where are we here? Okay. 21 minutes in. Saturday, 5th March, 1881. Down early this morning after a restless night. Holmes, as usual, monopolizing the Times. I rarely get a chance to look at it until after he has cut it up for his own reference files. The other papers had long accounts in their crime reports, and the Daily Telegraph, Standard, and Daily News all had leading articles on the Brixton mystery. Despite Holmes, and because there was some information in them which was new to me, I cut out the articles for my own scrapbook. Holmes then told me that he had seen them already and was amused by the inevitable credit given to Lestrade and Gregson. If the man was caught, it would be on account of their exertions. If he escaped, it would be in spite of them, he said. Heads I win and tails you lose. We were interrupted, much to the disgust of our landlady and myself, by the appearance of half a dozen of the dirtiest and most ragged street Arabs that I've ever clapped eyes on. Having called them to order, Holmes questioned one, called Wiggins, and learned that they had not yet found whatever it was Holmes wanted. He gave each a shilling and told them to go on trying and to come back with a better report next time. He remarked to me that there was more work to be got out of one of those little beggars than out of a dozen of the police force. For whereas the mere sight of an official-looking person sealed men's lips, these youngsters could go everywhere and hear everything. So here's our first mention of the Baker Street Irregulars. This is the origin of the Baker Street Irregulars, the first time they're brought up. Let's see, what does he say? What does it say? Baker Street Division of the Detective Police Force. The rest are in future to wait in the street. If someone can parse that a little better than me. Here he says, they are as sharp as needles. All they want is organization. It looks like it's French. Okay, continuing. He's decided to double-side his paper here. Just as they left, Gregson arrived, burst into our sitting room, seized Holmes' unresponsive hand, and proudly told us that the fellow we wanted was under lock and key. Holmes looked anxious and asked the man's name. It was Arthur Charpentier, the sub-lieutenant in Her Majesty's Navy, announced Gregson. Sighing with relief, Holmes offered Gregson a cigar and some whiskey and water and asked him how he managed it. The detective was very complacent, talked about the mental strain of the case, which Holmes, as a fellow brain worker, would understand, and chuckled so heartily over the thought of Lestrade going off on the wrong track after Stangerson that he choked on his cigar. When he recovered, he boasted that it was not Tobias Gregson's way to sit idly waiting for information to be volunteered. Did we remember the hat beside the dead man, he asked, and was crestfallen when Holmes quoted the manufacturer's name and address. John Underwood and Sons, 129 Camberwell Road. He asked if Holmes had been there, and when Holmes said no, pompously advised my companion never to neglect a chance. Gregson had discovered from Underwood the address to which the hat had been sent, E.J. Drebber, Charpentier's boarding establishment, Torquay Terrace. He had interviewed Madame Charpentier and got the full story from her and arrested her son. He had taken shorthand notes of her statement and showed us a copy of the transcript for his official report. Holmes was quick to congratulate him with great warmth. Okay, so they used the label in the hat box. Smart, very smart. Okay, so Holmes likes this work by Gregson. We will make something of Gregson yet. So there's two Scotland Yard people. Gregson he likes, Lestrade he doesn't like so much. And I think, if I'm right, that we actually have the label of that hat here. Yes, so there's the cloth label of the hat maker for the file. Okay, Madame Charpentier, or Charpentier. On your head be it, Alice. I will tell you all, sir. I guess this is the interview. Do not imagine that my agitation on behalf of my son arises from any fear lest he should have had a hand in this terrible affair. He's utterly innocent of it. My dread is, however, that in your eyes and in the eyes of others he may appear to be compromised. That, however, is surely impossible. His high character, his profession, his antecedents would all forbid it. Gregson says, your best way is to make a clean breast of the facts. Depend upon it, if your son is innocent, he will be none the worse. Oh, perhaps, Alice, you had better leave us together. The daughter withdrew. Now, sir, I had no intention of telling you all this, but since my poor daughter has disclosed it, I have no alternative. Having once decided to speak, I will tell you all without omitting any particular. It is your wisest course. Mr. Drebber has been with us nearly 3 weeks. He and his secretary, Mr. Stangerson, had been traveling on the continent. I noticed a Copenhagen label upon each of their trunks, showing that had been their last stopping place. Stangerson was a quiet, reserved man, but his employer, I am sorry to say, was far otherwise. He was coarse in his habits and brutish in his ways. The very night of his arrival he became very much the worse for drink, and indeed after 12 o'clock in the day he could hardly ever be said to be sober. His manners... Oh, I see. This is folded wrong. That's why it seemed out of place. Okay, so this is how it should have been. Okay, so now we're backing up a little bit. Here's the report. Here is Gregson writing about how he went to the place. Called upon Madame Charpentier at Charpentier's boarding establishment, Torquay Terrace, found her pale and distressed. Her daughter was in the room, uncommonly fine girl, looking rather red about the eyes. Have you heard of the mysterious death of your late boarder, Mr. Enoch Drebber of Cleveland? Madame Charpentier nodded. The daughter burst into tears. At what o'clock did Mr. Drebber leave your house for the train? Madame Charpentier says, agitated, at 8 o'clock. His secretary, Mr. Stangerson, said that there were 2 trains, one at 9:15 and one at 11. He was to catch the first. And what was the last which you saw of him? Madame Charpentier, changing color and hesitating. Oh, he says, that was the last you saw of him. She says, yes. The daughter, calmly after a pause, no good can ever come of falsehood, mother. Let us be frank with this gentleman. We did see Mr. Drebber again. Madame Charpentier says, she's greatly disturbed. God forgive you. You have murdered your brother. Daughter, Arthur would rather we spoke the truth. Gregson says, you had best tell me all about it now. Half confidences are worse than none. Besides, you do not know how much we know of it. Madame Charpentier says, on your head be it, Alice. I will tell you all. I will tell you all, sir. Do not imagine that my agitation on behalf of my son arises from any fear lest he should have had a hand in this terrible affair. He is utterly innocent of it. My dread is, however, that in your eyes and in the eyes of others he may appear to be compromised. That, however, is surely impossible. His high character, his profession, and his antecedents would all forbid it. Okay, so we read this. Okay. After 12 o'clock, he was never sober. His manners toward the maid servants were disgustingly free and familiar. Worst of all, he speedily assumed the same attitude towards my daughter Alice, and spoke to her more than once in a way which, well, fortunately, she is too innocent to understand. On one occasion, he actually seized her in his arms and embraced her, an outrage which caused his own secretary to reproach him for his unmanly conduct. It looks like this was actually misprinted. It's not just that it's... I think I see. I think is that. Let's see, there's this. Approach him for his unmanly contact. And then she says, on your head. Look, it's actually it's weird. Look. On your head be it, Alice, I will tell you all. And then here, on your head be it, Alice, I will tell you all, sir. So a little bit of misprinting. Rob says his version of the dossier doesn't have this page. Okay, reproach him for its unmanly contact. So this might be an extra page that doesn't belong here. So if we continue from here, reproach him from his unmanly contact. Maybe we can continue here. Why did you stand all this? I suppose you can get rid of your boarders when you wish. Madame Charpentier says, blushing. Would to God I had given him notice on the very day that he came. But it was a sore temptation. They were paying £1 a day each, £14 a week. And this is the slack season. I'm a widow, and my boy in the Navy has cost me much. I grudged to lose the money. I acted for the best. This last was too much, however, and I gave notice to leave on account of it. That was the reason of his going. Well, my heart grew light when I saw him drive away. My son is on leave just now, but I did not tell him anything of all this, for his temper is violent, and he is passionately fond of his sister. When I closed the door behind them, a load seemed to be lifted from my mind. Alas, in less than an hour there was a ring at the bell, and I learned that Drebber had returned. He was much excited and evidently the worse for drink. He forced his way into the room where I was sitting with my daughter, and then made some incoherent remark about having missed the train. He then turned to Alice, and before my very face proposed to her that she should fly with him. You are of age, he said, and there is no law to stop you. I have money enough and to spare. Never mind the old girl here, but come along with me straight away. You shall live like a princess. Poor Alice was so frightened she shrank away from him, but he caught her by her wrist and endeavored to draw her toward the door. I screamed, and at the moment my son Arthur came into the room. What happened then I do not know. I heard oaths and the confused sounds of a scuffle. I was too terrified to raise my head. And when I did look up, I saw Arthur standing in the doorway laughing with a stick in his hand. I don't think this fine fellow will trouble us again, he said. I'll just go after him and see what he does with himself. And with those words, he took his hat and he started off down the street. The next morning, we heard of Mr. Drebber's mysterious death. Gregson says, at what hour did your son return? I do not know. You don't know? No. He has a latchkey and he let himself in. After you went to bed? Yes. And when did you go to bed? About 11. So your son was gone at least 2 hours? Yes. Possibly 4 or 5? Yes. And what was he doing during that time? I do not know. Okay, let's see what Holmes has written. Quite exciting, I suppose. No doubt he saw that the whole case hung upon the one point, and he fixed her with his eye in that way he has always found effective with women. I guess he's talking about Gregson. Okay. And then we've got this odd extra paper. All right, what have we got here? So this was the note from the hat maker to Enoch Drebber, Charpentier's boarding establishment, Torquay Terrace, one gentleman's top hat, as ordered and paid. Okay, so he bought that top hat that I guess we saw next to his body. We don't know why. This is the suitcases. Remember, she said she saw where they were coming from by the stickers. Okay. And here we have a police report. Looks like they arrested the son. Arrest of Lieutenant Charpentier. Let's check in with the chat a little bit here. Rob says, my dossier does not have the second page. Mine starts with Gregson, why did you stand all this? Do you mean you're missing... Are you missing the introductory page then? Where... Are you missing the introductory page of the interview? This page? I wish I could show you what my cat is up to. I bought all these slow feeding toys for the cat where you put snacks in them and the cat is trying to get one out. All right, let me just turn on the air conditioner a little bit. Okay, here is the police report about the arrest. Lieutenant Charpentier was arrested this evening by Detective Gregson, accompanied by 2 officers. He was evidently dangerous and still carried the stout oak cudgel, which the mother described him as having with him when he followed Drebber. When touched on the shoulder and warned to come quietly, Lieutenant Charpentier said boldly, I suppose you're arresting me for being concerned in the death of that scoundrel Drebber. Nothing had been said to him of this matter, so that his alluding to it had a most suspicious aspect. The young man then volunteered a brief statement. And here's his statement. He says, Enoch Drebber was an unwelcome lodger in my mother's house for some weeks. He was a drunkard and a braggart and had been bothering my sister Alice. On Thursday night, I returned to the house to find the dastardly fellow assaulting my sister and attempting to force her against her will to submit to his beastly proposals. I rescued Alice from his foul clutches, hauled him into the road, gave him the shaking he deserved, and told the coward what I would do to him if he ever came near the house again. To make sure the blackguard cleared off, I followed him for some while down the street until he perceived me and took a cab in order to escape his just punishment. That was the last I saw of him. On my way home, I met an old shipmate and took a long walk with him. I did not get home until late. When asked where this shipmate lived, Lieutenant Charpentier replied, somewhere in Greenwich. That's all I know. Summary of the case. It is obvious that the Lieutenant Charpentier followed Drebber as far as the Brixton Road. There a fresh altercation arose between them, in the course of which Drebber must have received a blow from the stick in the pit of the stomach, which killed him without leaving any mark. The night was so wet that no one was about. Charpentier dragged the body of his victim into the empty house. As to the candle and the blood and the writing on the wall and the ring, these were clearly intended as so many tricks to throw the police onto the wrong scent. Okay, that does not sound right. Okay, and here is Watson continuing. That's the end of the police report. Now here's Watson's diary. Saturday, 5th of March continued. Just as we had concluded Gregson's account of his interview with Madame Charpentier and the arrest of Lieutenant Charpentier, who should appear but Lestrade, looking tired, untidy, and far from his usual jaunty self. He had evidently come with the intention of seeing Holmes privately, for on observing Gregson, he appeared embarrassed and fumbled nervously with his hat, muttering that this was a most extraordinary case. An incomprehensible affair, I think he called it. Gregson did not help. He inquired smugly whether Lestrade had yet managed to find the secretary Stangerson. Lestrade's answer was so unexpected that we were all three dumbfounded for a moment. He had found Joseph Stangerson, he said, murdered at Halliday's private hotel about 6 o'clock this morning. Gregson sprang out of his chair and upset the remainder of his whiskey and water. I stared in silence at Holmes, whose lips were compressed and his brows drawn over his eyes. The plot thickens, he muttered. Lestrade grumbled that it was thick enough already, and when Gregson queried the news, he replied petulantly that he had just come from the room and had been the first to discover what had occurred. Holmes asked him to tell us what happened, which he did, and I later requested to see a copy of his report, since I was too flabbergasted to make my usual notes of everything he said at the time. And here is the report from Lestrade. Further to the discovery in number 3 Lauriston Gardens, Brixton, of the body of Enoch J. Drebber, and being of the opinion that his secretary Joseph Stangerson was concerned in the death of Drebber, I set myself to find out what had become of Stangerson. They had been seen together at Euston Station about 8:30 on the evening of the 3rd. At 2 in the morning, Drebber had been found in the Brixton Road. The question which confronted me was to find out how Stangerson had been employed between 8:30 and the time of the crime, and what had become of him afterwards. I telegraphed to Liverpool, giving a description of the man and warning them to keep a watch upon the American boats. I then set to work calling upon all the hotels and lodging houses in the vicinity of Euston. It was obvious that if Drebber and his companion had become separated, the natural course for the latter would be to put up somewhere in the vicinity for the night, and then to hang about the station again next morning. Makes sense? I spent the whole of the evening of the 4th in making inquiries entirely without avail. This morning I began very early, and at 8 o'clock I reached Halliday's private hotel in Little George Street. On my inquiry as to whether Mr. Stangerson was living there, I was at once answered in the affirmative. The management assumed that I was the gentleman for whom Stangerson had apparently been waiting for 2 days. I was informed that he was upstairs in bed and had asked to be called at 9. Let's see what these little notes here are. Good to know that Gregson had passed on Madame Charpentier's description of the 2 men to his colleague. They would be likely to agree on some meeting place beforehand regarding his comment that if they had become separated, they would put up and meet somewhere else. Okay, let's see. So he's found the place where this guy lived. The management assumed I was the gentleman for whom he had been waiting for 2 days. He was to be called at 9. I said I would go up at once, for it seemed to me that my sudden appearance might shake his nerves and lead him to say something unguarded. The Boots volunteered to show me the room. It was on the 2nd floor, and there was a small corridor leading up to it. The Boots pointed out the door to me. Boots must be some nickname of the worker at the hotel. Okay. Pointed out the door. I was about to go downstairs again when I saw something that alerted me instantly. From under the door there curled a little red ribbon of blood, which had meandered across the passage and formed a little pool along the skirting at the other side. I gave a cry which brought the boots back. He nearly fainted when he saw it. The door was locked on the inside, but we put our shoulders to it and knocked it in. The window of the room was open, and beside the window, all huddled up, lay the body of a man in his nightdress. He was quite dead, and had been for some time, for his limbs were rigid and cold. When we turned him over, the boots recognized him at once as being the same gentleman who had engaged the room under the name of Joseph Stangerson. The cause of death was a deep stab in the left side, which must have penetrated the heart. Above the murdered man, on the wall, written in letters of blood, was the word Rach. And then Holmes says, I could have told him that as soon as he mentioned the body. And here he's written, I remember poor old Lestrade saying that it made him feel sickish in spite of his 20 years of experience when he saw the blood curling out of the door. The suspect intruder was seen by a milk boy passing on his way to the door. He happened to walk down the lane which leads from the Mews at the back of the hotel. The Mews at the back of the hotel, M-E-W-S. Can someone tell me what Mews is? You hear occasionally that something is at a location, there's something Mews, but I haven't heard it in this context. I'm not sure what it means. The Mews, M-E-W-S, at the back of the hotel. He noticed that a ladder, which usually lay there, was raised against one of the windows. One of the windows of the second floor, which was wide open. After passing, he looked back and saw a man descend the ladder. He came down so quietly and openly that the boy imagined him to be some carpenter or joiner at work in the hotel. He took no particular notice of him, beyond thinking in his own mind that it was early for him to be at work. He has an impression that the man was tall, had a reddish face, and was dressed in a long brownish coat. Wow, that's the same description of the guy outside of the previous murder. He must have stayed in the room for some little time after the murder, for we found blood-stained water in the basin where he had washed his hands, and marks on the sheets where he had deliberately wiped his knife. And what has Holmes written here? Rather, it matches well with my original description, wouldn't you say? Yes. There was nothing in the room which could furnish a clue to the murderer, nor any apparent motif. Stangerson had Drebber's purse in his pocket, but it seems that this was usual, as he did all the paying. There was 80-odd pounds in it, and nothing had been taken. A list of Stangerson's effects and the contents of the room is attached. 2 murders now. Same description of a guy walking around. No robbery. Effects of Joseph Stangerson found on and about his body at Halliday's Hotel, Little George Street. Purse belonging to E.J. Drebber. Cash contained in the purse, £80, 20 shillings, 6D. I always forget what the D is, a portion of a shilling. A telegram dated 2nd of February from Cleveland. A novel, A Rogue's Life, by Wilkie Collins, first edition, 1879. A Gentleman's Pipe, and a small ointment box containing 2 pills. And then the sergeant who filled this out has signed it, and Lestrade has signed off. Okay, here's the telegraph that was found, but let's check in with the chat. Rob says Mews is a row or street of houses or flats that have been converted from stables or built to look like former stables. Oh, that's very interesting. Oh, Joe J. Anderson says, or a short, narrow road where these buildings, stables, are found. So it's stables, buildings that look like stables, row of low flats that look like stables. Okay, that makes sense. All right, let's take a look at this telegram. Okay. So here's a note that Holmes wrote on it. It looks like it says, obviously, Lestrade must have sent this telegram after he received the description of Stangerson from Gregson as a result of his interview. Okay. From Lestrade to police headquarters. So look, the words are written out each in its own box. Please watch American boats, especially the Guion line, for passenger Joseph Stangerson, required urgently for questioning. Height 6 foot, slim build, sandy brown hair, neatly dressed, dark suit, American accent. Okay. And then a little note that you would find on the back of the telegram. Okay, so now we got a photograph of this guy, Stangerson's dead body, stabbed by someone who probably came in through the window. Okay. Another telegram. That's interesting. Received from the USA, American Exchange, from Cleveland to Enoch Drebber. JH is in Europe. Huh. Well, that's weird, isn't it? JH is in Europe. Are we told that there were two telegrams, or are we going to be told what needs to be put back in place? Telegram? Why are there two telegrams? Maybe we're going to hear about it here. Saturday, 5th of March continued. As soon as Lestrade had concluded his list of items found in Stangerson's hotel room, Holmes sprang up from his chair with an exclamation of delight, declaring, to the astonishment of both detectives, that the small chip ointment box containing the two pills completed his case. He was as certain of all the main facts, he said, from the time that Drebber parted from Stangerson at the station up to the latest discovery, as if he had seen them with his own eyes. There were, of course, details to be filled in. Promising to prove this, Holmes asked for the pills, which Lestrade happened to have, together with the purse and the telegram, for he was going to leave them at the police station. Holmes asked me if they were ordinary pills. They were certainly not, but we agreed that they might be soluble in water. Failed to attach any importance to these. Okay, so actually, if you look at our document, our book, we actually have the pill. Here it is. So let's wait until Holmes clears this of having any poison before I eat it. Okay. Rob says the extra telegram is just what Lestrade sent out to look for Stangerson. It wasn't found at the hotel. How can that be? Oh, right. This is the one. Okay, good. Okay. That's a little confusing. Okay, so what Rob is pointing out is that this one is not the telegram found in the hotel on this guy's person. This is what Lestrade telegrammed. This is the telegram found in the room. From Cleveland to Drebber. Remember, Joseph Stangerson is the secretary. JH is in Europe. Okay, so who is JH? Is that the killer? That's what we don't know. All right, let's go here. He says now that he sees the facts, what was found, he knows how to solve the case. We agreed they might be insoluble in water. Holmes then asked me to fetch up the poor little terrier that Mrs. Hudson had been looking after since finding it lying in the street from being hit by a four-wheeled growler. It was old already and on the point of death. I placed it on a cushion on the rug. Holmes cut one pill in half, dissolved one half in a teaspoon of water, told Lestrade, who said he couldn't see what this had to do with the death of Stangerson, to be patient. Added a little milk to the water and offered it to the dog on a saucer. The dog speedily licked the saucer dry. We all waited for some startling effect, but nothing happened. To Holmes's increasing chagrin and the detective's mutual delight. Is this how you test poison? It was incomprehensible that the very pills I had suspected in the case of Drebber should actually be found after the death of Stangerson and yet prove inert. Because they think the first murder was poison, but these don't look like poison. Suddenly, Holmes gave a shout, rushed to the box, cut the other pill in half, dissolved it, added milk, and presented it to the terrier. Whoa. The unfortunate creature's tongue seemed hardly to have been moistened in it before it gave a convulsive shiver in every limb and lay as rigid and lifeless as if it had been struck by lightning. Holmes explained with relief that he ought to have known that one of the two pills was deadly poison, the other entirely harmless. He then launched into a lengthy monologue about our failure to seize on the single real clue that was presented to us at the very beginning of the case, and how all the outre and sensational details that had made the case more confusing and mysterious to us had served to enlighten him and to strengthen his conclusions. The most commonplace crime, he said, is often the most mysterious because it presents no new or special features from which deductions may be drawn. I was no clearer. Gregson listened impatiently, acknowledged that Holmes was a smart fellow, admitted both he and Lestrade were wrong, since neither Stangerson nor Charpentier could have committed the second murder, and then asked Holmes outright to name the murderer if he could. Lestrade concurred, and I added that any delay might give the assassin time to commit some fresh atrocity. It is a mistake to confuse strangeness with mystery, he says. Okay. Holmes frowned, then told us there would be no more murders, and that he did know the name of the assassin. He hoped to lay hands on him soon, but it would be a delicate matter, for the man was shrewd, desperate, and supported by someone equally clever. He says here, the mere knowing of his name was a small thing compared with the power of laying our hands on him. Okay. Supported by someone equally clever. Looks like it's going into a non sequitur here. He says putting his hands on the assassin would be no delicate matter. And then it says both men were more than a match for the official force that would vanish instantly if they suspected they were being pursued. Why does it say both men? Okay. Are we missing a page? Let me check with Rob. Rob says, Jesse, you might want to break here because, okay, good. So I think we might break here because it feels like I'm missing a page here. Rob says, yes, you are missing pages. Okay, so they may be in the wrong order, or it may be that I have to get pages from Rob, but we will break here. Remember, this was all bound, so it's a little confusing how we could be missing pages, but you never know. But why don't we stop our session here? It'll give me time to make sure we're all in order for the next session. I think the next session will be our last. I can tell there's not that much left. Holmes has it all figured out. Do you have it figured out? I know I certainly do not. Okay, well, we'll stop here. We'll meet again next Sunday at 3 p.m. for the finale, unless there's a big chunk of pages missing, but there really can't be because it wouldn't fit in the container. So we'll get it sorted out. I am curious to see what the solution is because I don't get it. Okay, and then I'll see some of you later this week for some more games. And we'll conclude next Sunday. Thanks for joining me. I'll see you next time.